May I speak in the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Words from Luke's record of the Acts of the Apostles, which we hear in our readings in these early days of the Easter season, are astonishing. Today, it's a bond of heart and soul among the whole group of those who believed. And we're left in no doubt that the size of that group of believers was much larger than the 11 who'd been gathered behind that locked door on the day of resurrection. Chutzpah is the Yiddish word that captures the atmosphere, defined in my dictionary to be shameless audacity. If Luke's timeline is reliable, then by this point, the day of Pentecost had passed, many had been fired with God's Holy Spirit, and they had heard Peter's public testimony about what had been done to Jesus and how he had been raised from the dead by the power of God. All this is indeed the testimony of the faith which has been shared by believers ever since. Winding back some 50 days, though, we find the disciples behind locked doors for fear of the Jews. The gospel isn't explicit, but they must have been feeling distraught at the turn of events. And we're not told anything about how they reacted to the resurrection news that had been brought to them by Mary Magdalene. A truly powerful message that was read in last Sunday's gospel. But then they saw for themselves Jesus standing among them and saying simply, "Peace be with you." He picked up the very words that he had used in his last discourses to them before his arrest. He gave them his peace and reminded them that as his Father had sent him, so he was now sending them out, empowered by his gift of the Holy Spirit. But it is, of course, the famous Doubting Thomas, whose name is most closely associated with today's gospel reading. He protested that he must have access to the physical realities of the crucified Jesus if he was ever going to believe what his friends had told him. But when again, this time in his presence, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you," Thomas didn't actually need to put his finger in the mark of the nails. He just said to Jesus, "My Lord and my God." And it is that acclamation that is the heart of the matter. Jesus went on to say, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." And that's the challenge of faith for us. Do you believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ? We know it's the heart of our faith, but do we really believe? Each of us will have followed our own journeys that have brought us here to worship this morning. And before I touch on aspects of my own journey, I want to affirm emphatically that I am sure there are as many different routes to faith as there are believers. Our relationship with God through Christ is our own and unique. For me, almost 60 years have passed since two ordained Christians helped me on my way. The first is John Robinson, then Bishop of Woolwich, who published a short paperback, Honest to God, in 1963. And I've noticed my copy is shown to be from the fourth printing of that book in the very year of its publication. It excited debate and controversy because its purpose was to bring God down here and not have God stuck in the heavens out there. That's a crude way of putting it, but the book enabled me to relate to a human Jesus, in whom love was the redeeming feature. Robinson says, to believe in God as love means to believe that in pure personal relationship we encounter the deepest truth about the structure of reality. And he says this requires a tremendous act of faith. But what is important for him is that we're not called upon to believe in a God out there in the heavens. He goes on to assure us that belief in God is the trust that love is the ground of our being. And I felt this human Jesus was accessible, because as an inquiring university student at the time, I felt I could relate to his message about the primacy of love. My second mentor was a New Testament scholar called Charlie Moe. And in my last student year, I was lucky to find myself occupying rooms on the very staircase where this diminutive bachelor figure lived. He was charming and hospitable, and he stopped me journeying into humanism by showing so convincingly that the resurrection of Jesus was well attested by the evidence of the New Testament. He puts it like this: Jesus, the man of Nazareth, 2,000 years ago, though truly human, was also God, so far as a human being can be God. That is the astonishing conclusion to which the earliest evidence points. Though no genuinely human being can possibly be the whole of God, the whole of Jesus was God. He was God so far as God could be incarnate, that is, within human flesh and blood of that period. My preoccupation with the human face of God has continued through the intervening decades, and I've always wanted to distinguish between Jesus' total humanity while he was with us here on earth and the disclosure of his divinity at the resurrection. This has left me with the conundrum of somehow explaining all the ways and all the sayings of Jesus through his earthly ministry, in which he revealed his own unique relationship with his Father and the treatment of him that his Father had ordained: to be betrayed, tortured, and crucified. So my journey of faith goes on, and it's one that by definition cannot end in this life. but it is one that has brought me alongside the Apostle Thomas. I have for years resisted aspects of belief, but now I want to say to Jesus, my Lord and my God.